And we're live. So, looks like it's going to be another hot day in here for me. I've got a fan pointing on me right now because it is extremely hot. It sucks when it is cold outside and then it's really hot inside because you kind of have to dress appropriately to survive the outdoors and then start stripping all your clothes off to survive the indoors. So, but I'm excited to do a live. Hopefully things will cool down. I know that here lately, most of my lives have been going into it becoming dark outside, so we'll see how that goes. On here, and we'll get started. Turn my volume up. Hello.
Hello.
You're upside down for a second.
I know. Sorry about that.
Let's see if I can get me in. There we go. How are you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Doing good. Other than being really hot here, I'm good.
It was very hot today. Very hot today.
Yeah, Virginia can't make up its mind.
Doesn't seem to at all. So I thought it was only supposed to be like 72 today, and it was like 80.
Yeah, this morning I had a jacket on top of this, and now I'm wishing that I wore several shirts underneath of it as well.
Well, it's good to chat with you in person. I think we've chatted over here. I think we've chatted over the phone. I don't think we've ever chatted in person though.
Nope. I think you're actually the first person that's in the state of Virginia with me. So most people have been all over the place. I think the closest was Lance in North Carolina, but you're the first person. I mean, technically we're really close to each other. I'm in Waynesboro right now, so.
And I'm in Stanton. What is that, 20 minutes away?
Yeah. Awesome. So I will go ahead and let you kind of introduce yourself, and then we can go ahead and get started into a discussion.
Absolutely. So my name's Chris Wood. I live in Stanton, Virginia, not far from you. And I am the executive director of two national nonprofits called the LGBT Technology Partnership and Institute. I'm also the founder of the Shenandoah LGBTQ Center and Stanton Pride, as well as a foster parent and all kinds of things. But those are some of my proudest achievements. So. Awesome.
Yeah. So I think that you and I actually had conversations about the fact that you started the stuff here in the Shenandoah Valley because Lynchburg was kind of starting theirs. And when it came to, I was working with HBO on something to kind of talk about growing up LGBT in rural America, which I definitely did. I went away and then I came back. I think my love for the mountains pulled me back, and my love for my family definitely kept me coming back to Virginia.
It's beautiful here. People ask me I'm in DC a lot, or I was in DC a lot up until this year. And people ask me all the time, they're like, where do you live? You live how far away? Like, do you have cell phone signal out there? I'm like, it's not a desert.
Yeah. I think that a lot of people in the LGBT community, once they kind of come out or once they get old enough to move out of their parents' house, a lot of them do kind of move to the bigger cities to kind of escape the closed-mindedness that usually comes with the more rural conservative areas. So I'm definitely one of those people that I think it's really important to kind of educate the people in those areas as well. If we all run away, no change is going to come in those areas. So I definitely think that what you're doing here is amazing. I definitely want to talk more about that because I would say mine's more of a global reach when it comes to the type of activism that I do. I don't really do tons and tons of local stuff. I would gladly get more involved just because since I've moved back, I just kind of do everything online. But I mean, it's awesome to still connect with the gay community. Yesterday, we kind of talked about finding people, and like in the bigger cities, there's like gay people represent every single type of dynamic of people. Right. And we were talking about how in like the more rural areas, just being gay kind of puts you in a group because there's not as many to kind of choose from when it comes to groups around here. So
This is definitely not Washington, D.C., where I came out and grew up in my young, 20s as gay.
Would you say that it was probably easier coming out in that setting compared to people who are coming out in like this area?
I think so, from what I've heard. I mean, I think the benefit of what my work at a national scale versus a local and local scale is that I know what it's like. I listen to people who have come out in more rural communities, my husband being one of them, right here, actually. And so I definitely feel like I have a better understanding of it. And I think it is easier in the fact that you have the ability to, at least for me, it was connecting with people that I identified with. So gay men. I had access to Washington, D.C. as a city. I was able to go to DuPont. So I would say from that perspective, I felt like it was easier. But I've also heard stories about people connecting, maybe they're in theater or maybe they're part of, a group or a core of friends that was accepting, or there just seemed to be other people that were LGBT, maybe not as many. So I think I think everyone has their own unique and personal story to that, and they're coming out, and whether it was easy or hard, and I think it's all in the eyes of the beholder.
Yeah, I feel like for me, because I did come out when I was going to college here in Virginia, and it took me because I was very wrapped into my Christian organizations. I was part of Young Life. I was part of the Baptist Collegiate Ministries on campus. And my friends didn't disown me for coming out, but they definitely prayed for me. And I heard things about what they'd said behind my back. And it took me moving away to a different area where I was known as just being a gay person. It wasn't me coming out. And I think that I really learned how to accept myself there because I was, like you said, surrounded by people who were accepting of me and who were in the gay community. And that kind of made it a lot easier for me. Right. I've moved around a lot. In the bigger cities, it's interesting because I tell people when I came back to Virginia, I couldn't figure out what was different. But when I was in the bigger cities, they called me by my name and I was a friend. Right. When I moved back to Virginia, I became the gay friend. This is my friend, the gay. And remember that gay friend I told you about? And it just seemed like that became my identity.
Right.
And I kind of got to the point where I didn't like people announcing that right off the bat because I wanted someone to get to know me as a person and understand my character and values. And then I would come out and then they could kind of see who I was and be like, okay, right. He's no different than I am.
Right. I think that's interesting. I feel like, I've definitely been introduced that way. This is my friend Chris. He's gay, and it's like, well, I recognize that that's a part of me, but it's not all of me. And yet it's an important part of me. Even more so now with all the work that I do here locally. But I think for a long time I didn't like that. I was like, don't label me. I think for a long time I didn't even really want to, I wouldn't have rainbows around me or anything of that nature, as I have a rainbow flag over my my shoulder. And because I feel like I was always kind of put into that box, or also just trying to find my own identity. Well, who was I? What was I going to be doing? How was I going to be making change to the world for the better? And it was always led with, this is Chris and he's gay. So
yeah, I mean, when I go to events and stuff for the YouTube stuff that I do, everyone asks me what type of content I create. So instantly it's like LGBT content. I mean, that's what I produce. That's what I talk about. So it's what I'm going to talk and tell people. But I think that I'm not ashamed of giving myself that title. It's just I don't like that title being first presented before someone gets to know me as a person, because I do think there are people who stop listening as soon as they hear that, and then Absolutely. I don't have that opportunity to open any minds. So it's definitely not something about being ashamed. I'm definitely very vocal about my pride when it comes to being here in this area. I applied for this job that I have with my company, and first thing I kind of was talking about was like, yeah, I run an LGBT channel. I do a lot of activism, and I just kind of put it right out there because I don't want to work somewhere where they don't accept LGBT people.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Which is not always easy to do in a more rural community. I think it, up until recently, I think it's been easier, obviously with, discriminations, not the laws being passed so that we can't be discriminated against are definitely important. I feel like each state is doing a better job at advancing those things. Virginia is one of them. But I think I agree with you. I mean, for me, it was always, how do I create my own path? And how do I become my own boss so that I don't have to worry about that? That's always been my motto. Obviously, as any entrepreneur, entrepreneurs will work 80 hours, not to work 40. So we kind of shoot ourselves in the foot.
Yeah, that's definitely. So I think that one thing that is really, amazing that you do is just kind of creating a community for LGBT people in the more rural parts. You're saying that you came from DC, so I'm assuming that you came from an area that was very LGBT friendly, and then you kind of moved to an area where LGBT didn't really have a presence. It was more, we were kind of scattered, and we'd run to the cities to meet each other, and then go back to our country farmhouses and everything else. So when you first came down here, like, what was the process of kind of building that community?
Well, I came here via LA, so even larger city.
Okay.
I used to work in television. I used to work for Discovery Communications, TLC specifically, so Honey Boo Boo and Say Yes to the Dress and all those fun channels and shows. But my husband moved back here to take care of his grandfather. And we were moving back from LA and we came back here. In the beginning, I felt like it was small. The most rural place I had lived was in Las Cruces, New Mexico, where I was born. I'm a military brat. But I will say at first it felt small, but there was something also really nice about it, I think. There was something that was very welcoming about it, just the open air and just not being in a concrete jungle. So I think it took me a little while to get to the point that I was at now, where I started building community. As you know, with most like kind of entrepreneurial spirited individuals, when you don't find something that you want or you don't find that community, you start building it or looking for it. And I was finding that even in my national work, being in DC, I was finding people that were around here. I think we ended up moving back to DC for a year, and then we actually moved out to West Virginia for a little bit, where we have some property, and then back down here before everything you see now was really created. And really, we've been here for 6 years, and the center opened in 2018. So I think for, a good 4 years, or 3 years, I was really just here and living and thriving rather than creating, building, and community organizing. So,
yeah.
I don't know. It was, I'm sure you've heard the story. It wasn't a positive story. Unfortunately, it was a negative story that drove me to do it. But it was the positive side of wanting to create a better life and a better community for LGBTQ here, so they didn't feel like they had to leave. So that's the positive side of it. Is no one should ever feel like they have to leave somewhere they love, somewhere they call home, somewhere that's their family, to thrive and be and enjoy. Not everybody wants to live in the city, including LGBT. And so, as you and I have both expressed, and I think a lot of LGBT folks around the country expressed, they like being in the rural communities that they're either grew up in or that they've fallen in love with, or, I'm a military brat. I wasn't from here, but I've most certainly have an affinity for this area and the woods and the mountains. And so.
Yeah, I've had experience living in the concrete jungle. For me, like, I think just growing up here, because I stayed here until I was 18, and I think just all my friends here growing up was hiking, kayaking, rock climbing, just being out in nature. And when I moved into the cities, I found that I wasn't able to really relate to a lot of the people in the LGBT community. Like, shopping isn't something that I'm really a fan of. I will do online shopping to avoid having to go into a store. And when it came to trying to get people to go out into nature with me from the cities, a lot of the responses were just like, ew, you want to get in like the dirty river? Like, there's a pool, a private pool over here at my friend's house we can just sit in. And like, when you want to do like stuff outdoors, they're like, oh, but it's too hot, like I'm gonna sweat. And I was having a lot of trouble connecting with people. But then I came back to the rural area and I was having trouble finding acceptance.
Right.
And it just seems like something that I was forever going to be running back and forth trying to, like, people have told me, you're going to have to go to the city to find your significant other, then you're going to have to pull them back and hope you find someone that's okay with the country life. And I mean, for me personally, like, I'm okay with living in a city, but I definitely unwind. Like, I take deep breaths and I'm just like in love with the country. Like, going home after work and just staring up at like a billion stars, you can't do that at the the city level. It's completely different.
My favorite thing is to take the city gays and city LGBT folks out of the city and take them to where there's zero, light, and not even like the light on the edge, where it's just pitch black. You can barely see your hand in front of your face. That is, like, I think, the most magical experience ever. And growing up in New Mexico, it was easy to get to. That was very easy to get to out in the desert. And I started my life that way with my dad, and going out into, White Sands and, the Rocky Mountains, and learning to ski and stuff. And it was magical. There's something really important to say about it. I feel like more and more, just people in general that I speak to, especially this year, they're taking the time to do that, or they're letting their lease go and, traveling to a different state entirely to live for a little bit and just experience something different. And I feel like people are, at least a handful of people I've spoken to, have come out this way, whether from DC or what have you. And they're like, oh, I'm like 30 minutes from you. I'm like, told you. It's not that far. There is cell phone service out here. There's, population and...
Yeah, I mean, I definitely like the idea of creating a LGBT-friendly tone in the more rural areas, because I feel like the one thing that I noticed is, if we don't do that, like, adults, we can live wherever we want. We can decide, hey, this isn't something that's for me, I'm going to move back to the city. But it's the LGBT youth that they're kind of stuck in these areas. And when it comes to educating people, I think it's really important that, like, if you're an LGBT person, if you're an LGBT ally, I think it's very important to educate anyone at any time, because I think that the easiest people to educate are the people that care about us most. Mm-hmm. So if it's someone that loves me as a person, they're going to be more open-minded to my opinions than someone that I just walk up into, like, at a grocery store. So as we kind of expand and educate people, I think it is important that we don't forget about the more rural areas. And I also have noticed that, because I have gathered a lot of friends from the cities, they forget that we're not as progressed in the rural areas. And some of their very, very loud statements put a lot of LGBT people in rural areas at risks because we don't have a community of allies and LGBT people here to protect us. A lot of times I kind of define it as when LGBT people are out here, it's kind of you stand alone and some people will come to you. Whereas like when you do it in a bigger city, it's a completely different feeling.
I completely agree. You know, building an LGBTQ center here in the Shenandoah Valley is completely different than building it in a major city and in launching it. And in 100% transparency, I didn't realize that when I started it. I recognized the issue. I recognized that I was surrounded by people who cared, people, you know, allies, LGBTQ individuals, and just individuals that really wanted that community. But you're absolutely right in the fact that the statements are different and the approach is different. One, you're starting from kind of ground zero and you're having to educate not only the people that are around those LGBTQ folks and giving them the platform to do that and giving them the microphone to do that, but then also city leaders and those that are, you know, supposed to protect us and school systems and mental health professionals, and the list goes on and on and on. But as soon as you really begin to create that friendly network and more importantly, creating the safe spaces, which is really what the LGBTQ Center is supposed to be, the Shenandoah LGBTQ Center is creating that space where people can come and ask questions, whether they're LGBT or not. Maybe they're LGBTQ supported. Maybe they have a family member. Maybe they're questioning and they're not ready to come out. So therefore they're going to come to you as an ally. Maybe they are an ally and working within the community and are reaching out about, you know, particular topics or particular areas. It's been really eye-opening to see. I think most importantly is that is listening is really the key to the entire thing. And that's where we really started, was listening to the entire community. Having listening sessions where we brought together 50 and 60 people, you know, a couple years ago, and really listen to what are the key areas that LGBTQ individuals are struggling with, or those that know LGBTQ individuals. What are some of the things that the school administrators have heard, the teachers, the counselors, the other mental health professionals here in the area, what have they heard? And all of that informed what and how we built what we did. It's so simple. It seems so simple when you sit there and say, you just have to listen. But the thing is, you really have to listen, not just listen and go do what you're going to do or go think what you think is best or what your perspective is. Because again, everyone's coming out story or coming out circumstance is completely different. And so as a leader in a community, as someone putting together an LGBT organization or just supporting an LGBTQ community, you have to listen to the people around you and build the programs and the connective tissue in the way that is important to them. Quite frankly, I recognize who I am. I am a white gay male in a community that is surrounded by so many beautiful people that don't look anything like me and struggle each and every day from different minority backgrounds or community. Maybe they come from a family that's uber religious and they don't have supportive networks and they can't be out. That's a completely different experience than my own. And the only way that you're going to understand that and understand how to help them is to listen and then try to help them while continuing to listen and provide them the resources to be able to really pick themselves up by the bootstraps and continue on their journey in the best way possible.
Yeah, most definitely. I think that here in 2020, I've been seeing a lot of like very much divided groups of people, whether it's politics, whether it's movements that are going on, whether it's Supreme Court stuff being voted upon. It seems very polarized, and something that I kind of noticed when I moved back, I call them the city bubbles. The people that live in the magic city bubbles of protection for LGBT people, they don't understand what it's like to be LGBT in an area where you are the extreme minority. And like you were saying, one thing that I really learned is communicating with people that have very different views than my own and standing very strong on my beliefs and my values, because there's nothing wavering in me when it comes to knowing I have to stand up for LGBT rights. So no matter who I come in contact with, I'm not going to let them convince me that that's something that I shouldn't be doing. But you do come across people in areas like this, and starting any type of LGBT anything, whether it's a club or a friendly cafe that necessarily isn't a LGBT place, it's just a friendly place for them to gather. You have to be aware that you're going to come across people who think very differently, might completely disagree with human rights for the LGBT people, and you have to be able to communicate with them. But I think one of the biggest problems in the world right now is that we think we have to speak 20%, like 100% of the time. And people don't realize what you were saying is, like, you have to listen. To be able to make change, you also have to listen about why these people don't think that LGBT people should have rights, why they are scared of LGBT things popping up in their town. And when you listen to those types of fears, or just closed-minded views, they don't necessarily have to be fears. But when you listen to those types of things, that kind of helps you build like your statement and your platform to kind of say, hey, this is why I think it's important. Like, I've been going, since I moved back to Virginia, I've been going to churches because I still do have my Christian background. And because I'm very versed in the Christian Bible, because I'm very confident in my LGBT background, I kind of put myself out there. And I think one of the problems is a lot of people are very offended by the questions that people who don't know anything about gay people ask. I've been asked when I'm going to have the surgery to have like my penis removed. I've been asked like if I wear dresses. Like, they don't understand LGBT, especially in the rural areas. And I remember when I was young and I first came out, and people would ask the same things that they ask me now. But back then, I was very offended that they didn't just accept that I was gay. Like, they would ask questions like, oh, well, are you sure you haven't just been with the right girl? And at that time, I was just very offended by that they couldn't just accept that I was like gay. But now that I'm older, I realize that like, that's their normal. Like, heterosexual norms is what we've been taught our entire life, and they don't understand. And you have to be able to communicate with them. And I'm seeing so many people post things on social media where it's like, if you believe this, then unfriend me. I don't want to talk to you. And I'm like, oh no, that was like your opportunity there to like educate people. Like, even if they're just silently reading your posts, like, they're seeing something that they probably wouldn't see if you're not, like, if they didn't have an LGBT friend.
No, it's very true. I think that, you know, I grew up as a military brat, and there's no, I've definitely faced my fair share of opposition, and people who say they love me and yet have voted against me, or against my family. But I do agree with you. You know, I think it is important to make sure that we're educating. I think there's a way of educating and informing while not bending or changing who you are. And I think, you know, for me, that took a long time. I feel like for a long time, I bent who I was to conform to the environment that I was in, because I was unsure about what it meant to be LGBT or what it meant to be just Chris, and, you know, what those core values are. I think that it's, I see a lot of young people, and I remember a lot of young people that, you know, from when I was younger, that were really kind of bending and molding themselves to be what was accepted or what they thought they should be. And as you get older, I think that you start to pull that apart. I've actually seen some young folks now that are around me who are doing that work early. I feel like this year in particular has given them an opportunity to start looking at what is it that I really want to do. You know, oh, I can take a break from school without being like penalized. because it's not in person. So I've seen these really interesting positive things coming out of COVID and of the pandemic, of giving people the opportunity to slow down, take a moment, think really hard, and be able to create something different. You know, what that is going to look like in a couple of years, I'm not sure, but I feel like life was getting so fast and just so much pressure so quickly, especially for a young person. I'm like, there's a reason that like homeless and those coming out of foster care and homeless LGBTQ youth face such an uphill battle when they turn 18, because all of a sudden all those supports that they had are just gone. The state supports and the mental health professionals and whatever it is, all the positive things that were helping them get through it all are all of a sudden gone. And then, I mean, if anyone remembers being 18 to 24, it's becoming a glimmer in my eye because I'm 35 now and there's a lot of gray in this beard. But 18 to 24, I was making a lot of really dumb choices, barely scraping by. I don't think I would want to relive that age anytime soon. Just because you're poor, you're broke, you're trying to figure out life, you're bending yourself to fit in, to mold into whatever it is, and you have no idea what the next 10 years is going to look like. So, I wasn't the guy that had like the plan. I'm going to go to this school and then I'm going to go do this. And then I'm going to go work in this politician's office and go do that. I was an anomaly in Washington, D.C. because I didn't have that agenda per se. So.
Yeah, I definitely think that when it comes to, I mean, even now with the generation of young people that are coming out compared to when we were younger, the connection is so much better. The ability to create an online community is crazy compared to what it was when I was coming out. Facebook was just invented when I came out. So when I came out, I remember just kind of talking to people online first. And I was still very, very scared that I would be outing myself somehow, some way. Eventually that did end up happening. But I'm glad it did. I think that it's exactly what I needed. I don't think I would have came out anytime soon had I not had that person just kind of out me. But when it comes to kind of, because there are still a lot of places in the United States that don't have LGBT places. I've actually had a few people tell me that because of COVID, a lot of the LGBT bars and stuff, they're not surviving. COVID is shutting a lot of them down. And so I think when this pandemic is over and hopefully the economy starts like revving back up, how would you suggest people who are interested in getting something started in their area? Because a lot of people are trying to be their own boss. They want to kind of create that positive change in their communities, but you do get a lot of pushback. So how would you go about kind of helping people in areas? And I mean, people that are watching this are also from all over the world. Right. So there's different dynamics everywhere. There's some countries where it's illegal and punishable by death to be LGBT. So of course, that advice would be a little bit different for them, but yes, here in the United States and more accepting areas that are still struggling.
I think one is, if you can, be your authentic self. Like there is, I think that there's so many people that try to conform, like I said before, conform to some idea of what they should be or how they should act or what type of LGBTQ they should be. I'm not going to match, the amazing girls that I see on RuPaul's Drag Race. I could never do what they do. It would be ridiculous and a mess. So, like being authentic about yourself and really owning who you are is extremely important. And people will gravitate towards that authenticity. People will see that as power. It's like, look at, I work heavily in tech. And so think about Tim Cook coming out, what that meant for so many people who all of a sudden saw an icon that was, you mean I can be the CEO of a company and I can run one of the most profitable companies in the world. that is an incredible thing to see. Same thing goes for your community. So if if you have the ability to be that leader and be authentic and be out there and talk, do it. Tell your story, I think, is one of the most important things. Speaking with some of the folks at True Colors Fund, an organization that I'm, have worked on and off with for years, and Cyndi Lauper's organization, they constantly, when I came out, it wasn't the easiest, and there was some really rough times, but I always felt like I needed to belittle my coming out story because it wasn't as bad as other people's. But the thing is that you never know who's listening, and you never know who maybe has gone through a very similar experience. And that goes for every part of life. And someone may pull something from that story you're telling, that moment in your life, and find the strength or courage to come out, to be a leader, to be a voice, to stand up for someone. And so, you never know who's listening. I think it's my number one recommendation is you never know who's listening, and you need to be your authentic self. Number two is listen. You've got to listen. If you're not listening, then you're not catching the full story. And you're not authentically thinking about other people. You're thinking about yourself and your own position. Probably the third one is there's a lot of naysayers out there. There's a lot of doomsdayers. There's a lot of people that will say it won't work. It shouldn't be done. It's never been done that way, which for me is like an automatic challenge. And anyone around me who's either worked with me or for me or what have you, they know that someone says that, it's like white hot lightning through me. And they know that the next day something big is going to happen. But be that change. Like if no one else is doing it, very similar to here in the Valley, if no one else was doing it and not doing it in the way that was truly needed, regardless of, there were people that came up to me and said, well, we do have a community here. You just, you haven't participated in it, or you haven't gone here, you haven't gone there. And I'm like, it's not accessible. So be that change that you need to be for your community. If you're being authentic and you're listening to people and really hearing people out, and you're still not seeing what's needed there, then be the change and gather the people around you to help do it, because you can't do it alone. I think that's, that was the final piece that I really understood, or I began to understand, because my young 20s, it was like, if you want it done, do it yourself, because that's the only way it's going to get done. Running an organization, community organizing, supporting an entire community cannot be done on your own, as much as anyone tries. And I know if any of my team or anyone that knows me is watching this, they're probably want to beat me over the head with a book, because they've seen me try to do it alone too much, and take on too much. And the other side of that is when you do that, then you create silos where you're not pulling in the rest of the community. And so you've got to do it with other people, and you've got to lean on other people's strength and power and knowledge and experiences. Those are all so important to informing how an organization is built and run, because the LGBT organization here is going to be much different than the LGBT organization in Charlottesville or Washington, D.C., or the middle of Idaho. It's going to be all very different, because you're responding to what the needs are here. And so I think those are tangible things that can be taken across the world and can be applied, obviously safely. I'm very aware that there are countries that you can be hurt for, killed for being LGBT. It doesn't mean that you should stop. I think there's a way to do it. I think there's a way to positively support the people in this world who identify as LGBT. And quite frankly, in those areas, they need you more than ever. And so take what we've said and really build from that. I think it's important from that perspective. I'm curious, and I know you probably talked about this in several different ways. I've watched some of your videos, so I'm probably doing a little bit of repeat, but I think, how do you think you've been here, you lived here, you grew up here, and you've watched it go from having a little bit LGBT life, maybe up in Harrisonburg, or and now we've got some small bars popping up, and now we've got organizations. How has it been different for you? What do you think is the difference that this type of activity creates in an area like this?
I mean, for me personally, like you were saying, you just want to be your most authentic self. I know when I was little, like I just in this area felt like that was like the absolute worst. I was very much in the closet, and I did hear how people spoke about LGBT people because I did have some people in high school that were out. And so from there and leaving for 11 years and coming back to Virginia, I have noticed quite the change. You do kind of see the community pull together a lot better than, and I think that when it comes to like the Charlottesville, the Waynesboro, the Harrisonburg, I think they are all very, and even Lynchburg in Roanoke, I would say that they're very tight knit. I think there's strings definitely connecting all of those communities to each other. So it's almost just like we're all spread out. One thing that I noticed is until you start saying it out loud, you live in fear of the idea of what people might say. It took me, like here recently, I've been wearing my Biden hoodie saying like vote Biden. And when I first bought the hoodie, I was like, this is probably a bad idea. I'm probably going to experience some pretty negative things. But I'm the type of person that I believe that when someone sees that shirt, that they're like, hey, there's someone else out there, because there are a lot of Trump signs here. And honestly, when I started doing that, I was getting tons and tons of positive feedback. I would go out and every single day, the cashier person told me they loved my hoodie. I actually had people that came like wearing the Make America Great Again stuff, and they're like, hey, I respect you. And just kind of getting that sense kind of opened my mind to, hey, like people aren't as bad as like the media and social media make them out to be. Right. We have to realize that we are a community of people still, and we are a part of the community, even though LGBT might not be the most successful platform in an area like this. We do still play a pretty big role in the communities that we're in. And even within my company, like the company knows that I'm LGBT, like all the way up to like the COO of the company. We just had like an affirmative action speech, and I kind of weighed in on that with like the LGBT stuff and the laws that are being passed so that we aren't discriminated against. Mm-hmm. And I feel like the more vocal everyone is about it, the more we realize that the world is a lot more good than we realize. I think that media likes to focus on the negative, and of course you have to like be aware that you need to keep yourself safe. So in other countries, yes, even in the United States, it can be unsafe. All it takes is one person in the wrong place and bad things can happen.
Yes.
So I'm always like, so I put the equality sticker on the back of my car. I believe like when I see that, like I get super excited when I see equality stickers on other people's cars. So I just want to be able to add to that for someone else.
Yeah.
I definitely see more of it in Charlottesville than I do on this side of the mountain. And I see very few in Lynchburg. But I think that it's important to be louder. And I think if you don't have the strength here surrounding you physically, I think that creating a community online that will be there for you and show you support kind of helps you form a stronger you, a more authentic you that you can kind of go out and show the world. I definitely would never want to go back into the closet. I think that since I've come out, like I've been working so hard on being super authentic and just really digging down deep into who I am and just, is this what I'm doing because society tells me this is what's accepted, or is this actually me? And the more that I've done that, honestly, I think it's a different experience for everyone. But I'm very vocal about my beliefs, and people usually respect someone who's very vocal. I think when I used to be unsure or maybe kind of downplay my life to where I was like, okay, I mean, you guys cannot accept me. That's okay too. And now I'm just like, I mean, you have no option but to accept me because
Right.
I'm not changing for you. Sorry.
Right.
Since I've kind of switched that mentality, I think that these areas don't seem too threatening to me. I feel like I'm just as much of a powerful person in this community as someone who's walking around saying that I don't deserve rights. I think that it's important to educate yourself on your community because when you do argue with people, if you're not educated enough to argue your point, then you're going to lose and they're going to walk away feeling like they won. So,
Well, the more educated you are, the easier it is to have a conversation or an argument per se. But it's, for example, like watching the news, you should not just watch one news source. You should watch them all, even though, maybe one gives you heartburn. And you're not really sure like how to watch that, but you want to be informed and you want to know kind of how individuals are thinking and hearing what messages they're hearing. It's important to watch across the entire spectrum and make sure that you're well informed, that you're better informed than anyone else in the room, because that's what makes you a powerful leader. That's what makes you a community change agent. That's what makes you have the ability to speak up when you see something that doesn't quite feel right or isn't right or shouldn't have happened, or correct a situation that could have gone really bad and make it a positive situation. Again, people are meeting LGBTQ folks every day, whether they know it or not. And, even in places I go to, unless I have my like LGBT tech pin on somewhere, although I haven't worn a suit in months, it's like I gotta dust it off. But unless I'm wearing that, nobody knows I'm LGBT. They can make assumptions, but they don't know. But I think it's important, again, as you said, to be that authentic, voice and be that person and do it in a respectful way. Like we can all have the ability to be mean. It takes a higher person, a person that goes high and someone who is well informed and educated to not stoop to that level. We're all human beings. We all have feelings. We all have things that have impacted us, that have informed why we are feeling the way we're feeling. And we have to understand those. It's not inherent for people to hate. It's not something that we're born with. You don't see a baby roll out of the crib and it's like, I hate you. I mean, maybe if you take away their toy, they hate you. But again, we're not built to hate. We're actually built as a species to support each other and to watch out for each other for all the other things external that may be, impacting us. And somewhere along the line, we lost that. But I think we can really, I think through positivity, through things like this, I'm just so glad that you invited me to do this. First of all, because I don't take enough time to stop during the day to do this type of stuff. So it's fun to be able to talk about this in a different perspective, in a different light. And hopefully other people will follow suit.
Yeah, I think that because this is something that I discussed with people on previous lives, when it came to making that change, opening people's minds, I honestly think that our starting point has to be the youth. I hear a lot of people saying, oh, well, there's going to be more young people voting this year than ever before. And they think that young people are automatically open-minded and that the opinions are going to just be so blue, you have no idea what hit you. But they don't see the rural areas where the youth is being taught by the next generation above them. And those prejudices are coming right down into the next generations. Yes, we can connect on social media with people from different areas, so that has opened some minds. But I definitely think that we need to start striving towards LGBT being taught in schools. We need to find ways to make it to where that's an acceptable thing to talk about. And I think that communities and organizations like your own are really important when it comes to that, because we need a backbone to stand up for the LGBT community against the school boards, because you know that they're going to get pushback if a kid comes home and says, "Mom, we learned that boys can kiss boys." In rural areas, that's not going to be accepted, and they can probably rally up some people pretty quickly to end something like that. Is there anything along that line?
Launching things here did not come easy, and we definitely faced some discrimination, because not only did we launch a center, but we launched Stanton Pride, which, in its first year brought somewhere between 4,000 and 5,000. I was roaming the streets that day, and I was meeting people who grew up here and who came back just for that day, just because they were like, I just wanted to see that it was actually happening. They just couldn't believe it for themselves. But you're right. There's still a lot of closed-mindedness in regards to LGBTQ and other minorities, as a matter of fact. And LGBTQ within those other minorities is another huge factor, whether they be religious, African-American community, especially those that are identifying as transgender in our area, face enormous challenges and not being accepted and ending up homeless. And that's why it's important that, organizations are around to be able to support those individuals and provide the tools that they need, which is, it's not an easy feat. Trust me, it's been a long 2 years. But I'm super proud of the team that is in place, and super proud of the support that we've been able to get. Has it always been perfect? No. Will it always be perfect? No, most certainly not. Will we make mistakes? Absolutely. We knew that going in, and everyone who is running this organization, whether they be on the board or the executive director or whatever, they're all going to make mistakes. But that's okay, because we're human and it's okay to make mistakes. And we learn from them, we pick up and move on. The most important thing is that we're supporting our community the best we know how, by listening, by being there, by being supportive.
Yeah, one thing that I really liked that you said earlier was something that's working here where we're from is going to be very different when it comes to something that's in like Charlottesville or Idaho or Washington, D.C. Just like the communities are going to be different. And I think that a lot of times we forget that. We forget that everyone is different. Different isn't bad. Different makes us unique. And I think within every community, I think that we have to respect each other's differences. And one thing that I have come across with my platform and stuff that I've been doing is, like you said, we are white gay males. And just like in the world, white men are in positions of power to the percentage that is unfair to anybody else. And one thing that I've always tried to do is reaching out to people and just kind of getting other people to educate, because when it came to transgenders, when it came to bisexual, my little sister came out as bisexual about 2 years ago. When it's here recently, I've noticed that my platform was very, very lacking when it came to diversity, when it came to different ethnic groups, when it came to different religions. My channel was very lacking. So I think that it's very important to, when you create organizations for LGBTQ, you realize, hey, I'm a white male. This is not a white male organization. This is an LGBTQ organization that has to have representation for all, because in the gay communities, we've got them all. Like, even in the rural areas, they all exist. And we have to make community places for everyone to feel comfortable. I know that in cities where I lived, there's like the gay bar, the lesbian bar. I think that creating a community where everyone feels heard and everyone feels equal within our own community, where we're also fighting for equality, I think it's really important that that's kind of a focus, because I've come across LGBT people who are racist, who are transphobic, who are like they don't believe bisexual is a thing, and they say a lot of hurtful things to people within our own community. And it's hard for us to ask outside communities to support and love us when we can't even do it within our own communities.
Oh yeah. Oh yes. It's really hard to watch sometimes. I call it crab potting, where, you know, the crabs are pulling each other off the side, and we're not building each other up. We're not raising all ships. You know, I know even, I think it's also important to listen and hear our allies as well, and make sure that we're hearing maybe what they're facing, or what, you know, I feel like a lot of individuals, and I see someone just said something like, do you support straight people as much? Of course. My rule of thumb is my boards, my businesses that I run, they have a wide variety of people that we hire, from all different backgrounds, looking at the person themselves and what they have to offer, and how they can really benefit, you know, whether even it's an LGBT organization. The best thing I can do is also hire someone who identifies with the straight community as an ally, because that is one more perspective that our community, I think, sometimes is like, oh, well, they're not LGBT, why would we hire them? And it's like, well, maybe they care, maybe they're supportive, maybe they have a brother or a sister, or, you know, or a sister-in-law that is, you know, that identifies with our community. You don't know. And so to just discount somebody because of the way that they look, because of the way they come across, maybe because they're straight, or whatever the information they've given you, it doesn't mean that you have the whole picture of who that person is. So I think it's super important to be supportive of people around us. Things you say can really impact people in a negative way. Something that you would think would be so just so non-hurtful or non-controversial. Like, you just have to think about, you know, the people around you and make sure that you're paying attention to those things. Again, you're going to make mistakes and you're going to step in it, and hopefully those people will be forgiving enough to educate you. Although they don't always, you know, it's not always their position to educate you, but that you are receptive enough to kind of see, like, oh, you know, this person faded off a little bit, or hasn't really talked to me. I wonder why. Like, maybe you said something that upset them. And that's your responsibility to help figure that out, because, you know, as someone who's kind of trying to process that, it's not necessarily, you're not necessarily going to be open and say, okay, well, I'm going to go talk to that person. So,
I mean, to comment on the supportive of straight people as much, like, I have always been extremely supportive of allies, mainly because when I came out, my sisters, I've got two sisters, they were extremely supportive of me coming out. And not only did I face the wrath of the churches not wanting me to be a part of it, my sisters being supportive of me. Granted, one came out as bisexual later. My other sister, who is 100% straight, she lost Christian privileges that she could have kept if she didn't show any support. And I was part of an LGBT group in Harrisonburg a couple years ago, and it was Ally Appreciation Day, and we had a meeting, and they started discussing how allies should know their place, and that allies shouldn't do certain things, and they should ask for permission first. And I just kind of stood up and disagreed, which kind of caused a little bit of friction and tension in the group. But I do think that you have to realize that an ally, I think, has a bigger heart than someone in the LGBT community when it comes to standing up for someone, because they are doing something that they absolutely do not have to do. Because at the end of the day, if gay people lose rights, their rights are still intact. It doesn't matter to them. So when they go out there and put themselves out there and deal with hate on a regular basis, I've seen people attack my friends online. My friend Promise is one of those people who has been very supportive of LGBT, and I've watched people tear her apart, and she stands her ground because she has lots of people in the LGBT, myself included. And I think that those types of people are extremely strong because, once again, they're fighting a battle that technically they could just like throw in the flag and say, you know what, this is too hard, I'm done. I think it's amazing when allies stick themselves in positions, and we've got to stop attacking people that are allies. Yeah. We have to stop accusing them of using LGBT as a platform booster, because we have to remember they could be doing the complete opposite. They could be anti-LGBT. they could be saying, take the rights away, but instead they are using their voice to say, hey, these people deserve rights. And you've got to, even if it's not perfect, I think we've got to educate our allies. And if they're saying, because I had one friend, she said she was defending me online, and she said it's not his fault that she said something along the lines of like lives like a life of sin, but I love him no matter what. And I just kind of reached out to her. I was like, thanks for like trying to stick up for me, but saying that I'm living a life of sin is still a huge slap in my face. And you're kind of agreeing with the people that you're arguing with this statement. And we were able to mend that. And now when she speaks, she doesn't say stuff like that.
Right.
You've got to realize that.
If it's something, if that's the verbiage and words they've been taught their entire life, they don't know any other language. They know that is the language they know and are most comfortable with because they probably went to church every Sunday. They, their families were very religious, and that is what they learned. And so, I think it's important to recognize that, as you alluded to earlier, like, I know the first person I voted for was not in the best interest of me, when I was first able to vote. And so, recognizing that you are a product of what your parents raised and, the rules that were constructed around you, and you followed what you thought you knew was right until you really start making your own opinions. Depending on how sheltered your life was. I mean, there's individuals and religions and stuff like that are very sheltered. And I think sometimes we're looking for a fight, and it doesn't need to be a fight. It needs to be an education point, and it doesn't need to be nasty because it's an opportunity to be informative. Doesn't mean they're going to accept it. Doesn't mean they're going to see their way, but they're most certainly not going to see your way if you're mean and negative and hurtful. Like, that's just it's not going to work. That's one way to shut them down. But you do have the opportunity to begin changing hearts and minds if you do it in a positive way, if you take the time to explain like you did. I mean, I think it's important.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of people just assume because the life that they live is so verse and well known to them that everyone else in the world is just automatically given that same information. But you have to realize social media, even media in general, like if you just watch one channel, like you were saying earlier, we are fed a certain story, and that's what we live by. And if you've been to church every single day of your life, if you're surrounded by closed-minded people your entire life, like people who have never left the state of Virginia, when I speak to them, I do start to notice that some of their views fall very much in line with the people who have also never left this area.
Right.
And like, people reach out to me all the time and they're like, well, I want to know your opinion on this. And I was like, well, I don't really have an opinion on that because I'm not educated on that.
Right.
People don't realize that just because maybe you're very passionate about saving the turtles in the ocean, I don't really have that background because my main focus has always been LGBT people. And yes, I think the turtles should be saved. I think that they're important to the ecosystem, but I'm not going to be able to have an educated discussion about it because I don't have any time to research that when it comes to, and if you come at me like screaming at me because I'm sucking out of a plastic straw, the last thing I want to do is have a longer conversation with you. But if you came up to me and you're like, hey, here's some information about the percentage of plastic straws that end up in the ocean, it's a lot easier for me to be like, oh, wow. Yeah, I mean, a $10 purchase of a reusable straw is not that bad.
Right.
But
Exactly.
people seem to be so on defense all the time. And it's very off-putting when someone's trying to have a conversation. And I mean, I've been getting a lot of shirts and stuff that different companies have been sending me, and I think that they put out a great message. And I had someone attack me because apparently the industry that makes clothing is very it destroys the environment because of all the cotton and everything that's being used for that. And I wasn't even given a chance to be educated on it. I just got attacked and called a horrible person. And I didn't even know that that was a thing. I mean, I tell them that I think it's better that I'm wearing a shirt that's going to create a positive message than wearing a designer shirt that has no positive message. Most of my shirts are putting positive messages out there. I can't walk around naked, so I might as well put a positive message on there. But yeah, I think that it's really important to realize that we can't like attack people who don't understand. We have to understand that, hey, this might be a teachable moment. And if you aren't a teacher, which everyone plays a role, like I was saying in the Black Lives Matter live that I did, there are some people who are going to play the role of teacher. There's going to be someone who plays the role of protester. There's going to be people who are there to defend, people who care and love the people that need that mental health attention. There's people that play every role. And if you are not a teacher, then you should know who's a teacher. What YouTube channels should you send them to? What books should they read? Those are things that you should know so that you can educate people, because attacking people and telling them that if you vote for Trump, you are killing gay people, that's going to shut them off. And what we did was we created a very, very powerful Trump supporter and a very anti-LGBT ally. And I think that that can be dangerous, especially in rural areas where, like I was saying, you never know when there might be a moment where you need an ally. Maybe you parked your car in a dark parking lot and someone walks up to you and is going to beat the hell out of you. It would be nice to know that there's someone in the car 2 like parking spots away that's an ally that's going to help.
Exactly. No, it's important. I'm a huge karma believer, putting positive into the world, and that, you know, you get positive out. Does it work 100% of the time? No. Are there still bad days? Of course. But, you know, I feel like when you're able to put that positive into the world, when you're able to give back, and really give back in a way that changes people. You don't have to give back to a ton of people. You don't have to change, you know, millions of lives. You can change 1 or 2 lives or 3 lives, and that creates a ripple effect, as long as you've empowered them also to do the same, and begin changing that. And that, I mean, for the LGBT work I've done and all the things that I've really pushed, you know, forward here in the Shenandoah Valley and across the nation, it has always been raising people up and ensuring that you're promoting people to and showing them how to make the change themselves, because you can't do it all. And the more people you have engaged in that type of work, the more positive the outcome is. If we can all leave the world just a little bit better, we'll never see the impact. We'll never be able to fully measure it. And I think but the ability to make the change over the long haul is really important. I think I'm seeing a lot of that now. We're doing research around LGBT communities and privacy at LGBT Tech, and I'm seeing this long trend of history that is well before the gay liberation movement. You know, in the 50s and 60s, that where LGBTQ were brought up in laws and privacy laws and some of the very foundations of some of our privacy protections. So it's just really inspiring to see. And again, you don't know until you educate yourself. So, you know, you've got to listen, you've got to really hear it out, and you've got to help other people understand the same.
Most definitely. Like saying the positive thing, I think that a lot of people, like, you have to realize that there's no like end to it. Positivity can be pulled out of anywhere. Like, you can continue pushing it out no matter how negative the world gets. My friends kind of get annoyed with me sometimes with how easily I can twist any situation into a positive one, whether it's just, hey, this was a really shitty experience. Look at all the things that we learned from this. Like, oh, wow, this was a really shitty time to like deal with this, but think about what I learned here and I can use to help other people later on in life who maybe won't experience it or will and need a supportive person to help them through that. So I definitely think that when it comes to positivity, there's endless ways that you can do it. Just because the way that you and I are doing it right now is Instagram Live does not mean that people who are watching couldn't do it in 1,000 different other ways. Like, every single day you can find a way to add positivity, and it doesn't have to be to the LGBT community. It can be to the world. Everyone needs it. It's not just our community. All the communities need more positivity and love and kindness out there. That's one of the big reasons why I've been doing these lives, just because a lot of people are following me, and I want people to see what I'm doing, but I also realize that one of the big reasons why I can do what I do is because I do surround myself with people like you and all my other friends I've been doing lives with, because seeing things that you're doing inspires me to keep going. Seeing things that my other friends are doing keeps me going, because it makes me feel like, hey, I'm not the only one doing this. So I definitely appreciate you coming on and doing this with me. I think that what you're doing is awesome. Hopefully with all this COVID stuff, I know that we were going to hang out right before it all kind of started, and then we're like, oh, maybe we should socially distance ourselves. So hopefully after this stuff clears up, we can kind of meet in person and maybe kind of talk about what you do, talk about what I do, and see how we can benefit each other. I think that's definitely a big part of like moving things forward, is collaborating with people.
I would love that. It would be awesome. I appreciate the invite today. I really, like I said, I enjoy talking about it. It's nice to slow down and think about the impact one life can have and the impact we can have on so many others. So thanks for including me.
Yeah, awesome. Well, I will let you go so that you live your evening in whatever way that you decide is fit. I'm going to drive an hour home and grab some dinner.
I'm going to go take care of the kiddos.
Sounds good.
Bye. Take care.
Have a good one.